What if everything you thought you knew about prayer was wrong? What if the way you've been reaching out to God has been more like speaking into a void rather than opening a door to divine power? Imagine for a moment being in the place of a desperate mother, watching her child suffer while medicine offers no hope, only to be told that the very method of prayer she had relied upon was actually blocking the healing energy she so desperately needed. Has this ever happened to you, where your prayers felt unanswered, as if your words dissolved into silence? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, and it could shift forever the way you understand your connection to the divine. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Your presence here matters, because this isn't just another story. It's about you, your soul, and your path to the spiritual connection you've always longed for. Edgar Cayce, known as America's greatest psychic, revealed something revolutionary. Prayer isn't simply a request sent upward in hope. It is a living channel, a vibrational alignment that allows the very energy of God to flow into you, through you, and around you. In one of his most documented readings from the late 1920s, Cayce told that desperate mother that her words, her intention, and her inner state were misaligned, and this misalignment was acting as a barrier against divine healing. The stenographer in the room, who had been trained to record each word faithfully, was stunned, and soon the world would be too, because this was not an isolated moment. Over 4 decades, through more than 14,000 recorded sessions, Cayce revealed that miracles are not reserved for saints, prophets, or mystics. They happen when ordinary people understand and apply divine principles correctly. And here lies the most provocative truth. Divine healing and connection are not about begging God to intervene, but about learning how to open yourself as a vessel for divine energy to move. Has this thought ever crossed your mind? That maybe the silence you hear in prayer is not God ignoring you, but a sign that something within you must shift to receive? Think of it this way. If a radio is filled with static, no matter how loud the signal being broadcast, the music won't come through clearly. Cayce taught that most prayers are like static-filled transmissions, sincere, emotional, but blocked. Yet when the static is cleared, even the faintest whisper of divine guidance can suddenly feel like thunder rolling through your soul. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because these teachings are not abstract theories. They are methods, practical, documented, and tested, that continue to transform lives to this very day at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine. Instead of speaking into the silence, you step into it. Instead of pouring out your words, you learn to listen. You quiet the mind, still the heart, and open yourself not to sentences or explanations, but to impressions, energy, and knowing, the living current of the divine flowing into you. Doesn't that feel different? Doesn't it sound like the very thing your soul has been waiting for? This was the first of Edgar Cayce's 7 divine teachings, and it was enough to alter the course of countless lives. People who practiced it not only found healing but also experienced clarity in their decisions, relief from financial struggles, and a profound sense of peace they had never known before. What if 10 minutes a day in this new form of prayer could change everything in your life? Stay with me, because in the next part, we will dive deeper into what Cayce called the true key to unlocking divine connection. And once you see how this first teaching fits into the larger picture of all 7, you'll realize that the doorway to God has always been closer than you ever imagined. If you're finding value in these insights and want to keep exploring teachings like this, make sure to subscribe so you can continue this journey with me. Imagine being told that the way you've prayed your whole life may not have been wrong in intention, but in alignment. Edgar Cayce revealed that prayer, as most people practice it, is often like sending words into the air with no real reception on the other side. It's not that God is absent or unwilling to respond, but rather that our mindset creates static, blocking the very current of divine energy that longs to move through us. This is a hidden truth that shocks many, because it challenges centuries of tradition and familiar rituals. but it also opens a door to transformation that few ever thought possible. Cayce's work did not emerge from vague philosophy or abstract teachings. It came from more than 14,000 readings, documented word for word, creating one of the most extensive archives of spiritual revelations ever recorded. Behind the scenes of those sessions was a man born in rural Kentucky in 1877, an ordinary soul who discovered extraordinary abilities. He could enter a self-induced trance, access information far beyond his education, diagnose illnesses, and suggest treatments that baffled the medical establishment. And yet, what truly set him apart was not just the ability itself, but the discipline of documenting every detail. These weren't myths passed down by whispers. They were precise transcripts that remain accessible to this day, carrying a weight of authenticity that few spiritual sources can claim. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because understanding who Cayce was helps us understand the impact of his teachings. Doctors at first dismissed him, skeptical of a man without medical training daring to prescribe cures. But then, something impossible to deny began to unfold. Healings happened, lives were restored, and even the most reluctant physicians started to send him patients. Imagine the mindset shift required to witness someone bypass accepted knowledge and access something higher, something that seemed to exist between the physical and the divine. This was not chance. This was evidence of a connection that rewrote the rules of what it means to be human. When Cayce spoke about prayer, he wasn't asking people to abandon their faith traditions, but to reframe their relationship with God. He described prayer as vibrational alignment, a tuning of the inner instrument so that divine frequency could resonate clearly. Think of it as standing before a locked door. Most people knock endlessly, waiting for it to open. But Cayce showed that the key has always been within, and once it's turned, the door doesn't just open. It dissolves, and the presence of God floods in. The power of this revelation lies not only in the experience of healing, but in the shift of perception. Prayer was no longer a plea. It became a state of union. This shift of perspective is what still touches people today. It's not only about physical cures, though thousands testified to miraculous recoveries. It's about the decisions we make, the way we walk through challenges, the clarity we gain when we stop forcing our will and start attuning ourselves to divine rhythm. Cayce's readings revealed that the moment prayer becomes listening rather than asking, everything changes. What once felt like silence suddenly carries impressions, insights, and a knowing that transcends logic. And when this connection happens, transformation is inevitable. It impacts health, relationships, finances, and the deep longing for purpose that so many carry quietly within. As we move forward, picture the journey of those who encountered Cayce, ordinary men and women who walked in despair, carrying burdens that seemed immovable, and who discovered that by shifting how they prayed, by stepping into silence rather than filling it with words, they unlocked a current of guidance that had always been waiting. These revelations are not locked in history. They remain as alive and accessible now as they were in those documented sessions almost a century ago. And here's something I'd love to hear from you. Write in the comments. This makes sense to me if you feel that these teachings resonate with something inside you. It's fascinating to think that one of the reasons Edgar Cayce's legacy still carries such weight today is because of how meticulously everything was preserved. Every word, every pause, every revelation was faithfully transcribed by his stenographer, Gladys Davis. Behind the scenes of his sessions, she sat with unwavering attention, capturing not only the content but the rhythm and nuance of what he expressed. That level of documented accuracy means that what we're exploring now isn't a legend passed down through fragmented memories. It's a direct record, untouched by distortion. It gives us access to a hidden truth, spiritual guidance that was spoken nearly a century ago, yet still pulses with relevance today. Imagine living in a time when medicine was still fighting to understand the human body, and suddenly this man, without a degree, begins offering diagnoses and cures that save lives. Of course, the medical community laughed at first. Skepticism was their natural defense against what seemed impossible. But as cures began to pile up, as patients walked into their offices carrying stories of recovery that no explanation could dismiss, doubt slowly shifted into respect. What once seemed absurd became impossible to ignore. This journey from disbelief to recognition reveals something profound about transformation, not just of the patients who were healed, but of the entire mindset of a generation. When faced with undeniable impact, even the most rigid perspectives began to bend. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the first divine teaching Cayce revealed was not about herbs or physical treatments. It was about prayer. Not prayer as most people know it, but a radical redefinition of what prayer actually is. According to Cayce, prayer is not asking God for something, as if speaking to an unresponsive wall. It is aligning with divine energy, becoming an instrument through which that energy can flow. This is vibrational alignment, and it flips everything upside down. Suddenly, prayer is no longer about words. It's about resonance. Think of it like tuning a musical instrument. If a guitar is out of tune, no matter how beautifully you strum, the sound will never be right. Prayer works the same way. Cayce revealed that most people are strumming with sincerity but out of alignment, so the connection never feels real. But when the strings of the soul are tuned properly, the vibration harmonizes with divine presence, and the result can feel miraculous. This hidden truth explains why so many people spend years praying with devotion and yet feel unanswered, while others, with just a subtle shift of awareness, experience profound transformation. The impact of this understanding goes beyond spirituality. It touches every part of life, because when you learn to align rather than to ask, your mindset changes. Decisions that once felt heavy begin to flow naturally, as if guided by an unseen intelligence. Struggles that seemed immovable shift as energy begins to flow differently through your being. Behind the stories of healing and spiritual awakening documented in Cayce's archives lies a simple but powerful revelation. Connection to God is less about effort and more about openness. This is why so many of his readings emphasized entering the silence. Not silence as absence, but silence as fullness, a state where the noise of the mind fades and the current of divine energy is finally felt. It's not about hearing words in the way we expect, it's about receiving impressions, subtle knowing, and a sense of presence that needs no explanation. For those who practiced it, the journey often began with healing in the body, but soon expanded to transformation in relationships, clarity in finances, and peace in the soul. The effect was holistic, reminding us that spirit and matter were never meant to be separate. And perhaps the most striking part of all this is how ordinary people responded. Farmers, teachers, parents, individuals with no background in mysticism reported that when they practiced this new way of prayer, their lives shifted in ways they could not deny. It wasn't abstract theory, it was practical impact. It showed that the divine was not distant, but waiting, ready to flow through anyone willing to align. This teaching was only the beginning of Cayce's revelations, but even on its own it carries enough depth to reshape how we approach not just prayer, but life itself. And I'd love to hear from you. Write in the comments, "I choose alignment," if this resonates with your own journey. When Edgar Cayce spoke about prayer, he was not referring to a ritual of words repeated in hope of being heard, but to something much deeper, something that transcends language itself. He described it as entering the silence, not silence as emptiness, but silence as a living space where impressions, guidance, and energy are received. Imagine sitting quietly, not with the tension of waiting for a reply, but with the openness of allowing yourself to be immersed in a presence greater than thought. That stillness becomes the channel through which divine impressions arrive, often not as words but as feelings, inner clarity, or an unshakable knowing. This hidden truth unsettled many at the time, because it suggested that the most powerful prayer is not about speaking at all, but about listening with the whole being. And the impact was undeniable. Accounts preserved in Cayce's archives reveal stories of people who, after adopting this practice, experienced transformations that went far beyond spiritual serenity. Financial struggles eased, opportunities appeared, relationships healed, and even the course of entire families shifted. It was as though aligning with the divine current reorganized not only the inner world, but also the circumstances surrounding it. Behind the scenes of these stories, one pattern became clear. When people stopped trying to control outcomes and instead opened themselves to divine impressions, life itself began to flow differently. It's a mindset shift as radical as it is simple, showing that transformation is less about forcing results and more about creating space for them to arrive. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce also warned that silence alone is not enough. Without purification, the practice can feel like tuning a radio that never clears the static. Meditation or prayer without preparation can leave the seeker frustrated, caught in confusion instead of communion. Purification, as Cayce explained, was not about rigid rules or outward morality, but about removing the noise, mental clutter, emotional heaviness, and physical imbalance that blocks divine reception. This was one of his most practical revelations, that spirit, mind, and body are woven together in such a way that one cannot thrive if the others are neglected. Consider how much interference we carry in daily life, resentments we hold on to, anxious thoughts we replay, foods and habits that weigh the body down. Each creates static in the system. Cayce revealed that these subtle forms of buildup prevent us from hearing the divine signal clearly. And so purification became the key to transformation, not as punishment, but as alignment. By choosing thoughts that elevate, practicing forgiveness, and even caring for the body through simple natural routines, seekers found that their moments of silence became charged with clarity and power. Suddenly, impressions flowed more freely, intuition sharpened, and the sense of divine presence grew, undeniable. This teaching invites us to think about purification as an ongoing journey, rather than a one-time act. It's not about perfection, but about creating conditions where divine energy can move unhindered. Just as a musician polishes their instrument so that the music resonates in its purest form, the soul too must be tuned through choices, decisions, and intentional practices. And the beauty lies in its accessibility. Anyone, regardless of their background, can begin clearing the static in their lives, step by step, and discover what it means to connect more deeply. The stories preserved in the archives testify to the impact of this practice. People who had meditated for years without breakthrough suddenly reported visions, peace, and inner revelations once they embraced purification. They realized that the hidden truth was not that God had been distant, but that their own interference had kept them from receiving what was already there. This shift is powerful because it removes the illusion of separation and places the responsibility back in our hands, not as a burden, but as a profound empowerment. And this is where the journey begins to take on an even greater depth, because purification is not just about clearing away what doesn't serve, but about awakening a higher state of awareness that Cayce called Christ consciousness. That state is not reserved for a chosen few. It's a potential within all of us, waiting for the right conditions to be revealed. Write in the comments, "I'm clearing the static," if this resonates with your own path. When Cayce spoke of clearing the static, he wasn't only describing a spiritual metaphor, but pointing to a reality that each of us can feel in our own lives. Think about those moments when your mind is restless, your heart is heavy with unresolved emotions, and your body feels weighed down by habits that don't serve you. In those states, even when you try to pray, meditate, or seek clarity, it's as though the signal is jammed. The words may be sincere, but the frequency is clouded. Cayce revealed that these blockages, resentments, anxieties, unhealthy patterns, don't just affect our mood or our health. They interfere with our ability to connect with the divine. It's a hidden truth that few consider, yet it explains why so many people feel as if their spiritual practices yield no response. He insisted that true transformation begins when we start to recognize the unity of body, mind, and spirit. These are not separate compartments of our existence, but threads woven into one fabric. Neglecting one inevitably frays the others. Behind the scenes of countless readings, Cayce would prescribe not just spiritual exercises, but also dietary adjustments, physical therapies, and emotional healing practices. To him, harmony was not optional, it was essential. If the body was toxic, if the emotions were unresolved, the spirit could not fully shine through. This integrative approach was radical for his time, yet it carried an undeniable impact. Those who embraced it found that their journey toward clarity was no longer uphill resistance, but a flowing alignment, like a river finally freed from debris. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's teachings on purification went beyond the idea of removing negative influences. He emphasized the importance of cultivating what he called Christ consciousness. This wasn't about adhering to a religious label or doctrine, but awakening a higher awareness of divine love within. Christ consciousness, as he described it, is a mindset that transforms the way you see yourself, others, and the world. It is a lens through which judgment dissolves into compassion, fear gives way to trust, and separation yields to unity. Imagine the impact of living each day from that awareness. Decisions that once seemed heavy would feel guided, not by calculation or fear, but by an inner compass aligned with love. Conflicts that felt insurmountable could suddenly be approached with a new mindset, one rooted in understanding rather than reaction. The transformation doesn't occur in one sweeping moment, but through a steady cultivation, like tending a garden. The more you nurture it, through thoughts, actions, and openness, the more it blooms, reshaping not only your inner life, but also the external circumstances you encounter. Cayce's records show that individuals who embraced this state didn't just recover from ailments or overcome obstacles. They described their lives as if a veil had been lifted, as if they had been moving through shadows before and suddenly stepped into light. It was not merely about healing the body or calming the mind, but awakening to a sense of belonging to something greater. The revelations that came from this state of consciousness often brought with them a clarity and peace that no external situation could shake. This idea challenges us to rethink what purification truly means. It is not simply the absence of negativity but the intentional choice to align with love, to cultivate a higher vibration that brings body, mind, and spirit into harmony. It is about embracing practices and decisions that foster clarity, releasing those that create noise, and allowing the awareness of divine love to saturate every corner of our being. And in doing so, the static clears, and what once felt distant becomes immediate and alive. As we continue this journey, the path opens to an even deeper revelation, one that Cayce believed was the very key to why some people experience profound connection with the divine, while others struggle for decades. Write in the comments, "I choose harmony," if this understanding resonates with you. Those who embraced what Cayce called Christ consciousness often spoke of their lives in terms that defied ordinary explanation. They didn't just recover from illness or find relief from struggle. They described an entirely new quality of awareness, as if their vision of reality itself had been renewed. It was more than healing, it was illumination, like discovering a hidden dimension of light that had always been present, but unseen. And once that light awakened within them, their journey changed. They began to walk through life with a sense of guidance that felt constant, not occasional, as though divine presence was no longer something to search for, but something alive in every breath. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's next revelation touched on something few had ever considered in such practical terms. He spoke of spiritual centers within the body, points through which divine energy enters and flows. For many, this sounded mystical, almost unbelievable, yet Cayce gave concrete explanations and specific guidance that transformed vague curiosity into lived experience. These centers were not abstract concepts to him. They were real, functional gateways, capable of being awakened and harmonized to bring about direct spiritual impact. Behind the scenes of his readings, countless individuals who had never encountered such teachings began to experiment with the practices he suggested. What unfolded was extraordinary. Some reported visions that offered clarity about their lives. Others described a profound sense of love pouring through them, and many found themselves capable of perceiving guidance in ways they had never thought possible. These were not the exclusive experiences of monks or mystics. They happened to farmers, teachers, mothers, and soldiers, people living ordinary lives who suddenly tapped into extraordinary states of awareness. The awakening of these centers revealed a hidden truth about the human journey, that the body itself is designed as an instrument of divine communication. Just as a radio receives frequencies when properly tuned, the human being, body, mind, and spirit aligned, becomes capable of receiving the higher frequencies of guidance, wisdom, and healing. Cayce emphasized that this wasn't about forcing or chasing experiences, but about creating balance, purity, and openness, so the natural flow of energy could move unhindered. The results spoke for themselves, documented in testimonies where people's decisions shifted, their mindset expanded, and their sense of connection deepened beyond what words could capture. Imagine for a moment the impact of awakening such centers. Instead of feeling cut off, as though heaven were distant, one begins to sense the flow of divine energy as an intimate reality, present within and around at all times. This transformation of perception brings not only visions or mystical experiences, but a grounded strength in daily life. Choices that once caused anxiety become infused with clarity. Conflicts that drained energy now reveal pathways of resolution. Even the body responds, as health and vitality seem to reflect the inner alignment. It is a journey that demonstrates how spiritual power, when properly awakened, does not detach us from life but integrates us more deeply into it. Cayce, however, was clear that such gifts carried responsibility. He warned that awakening these centers without grounding them in love and service could lead to imbalance. The power itself was not the goal. It was the alignment with divine will, expressed through compassion and humility, that ensured the experiences led to growth rather than confusion. This behind-the-scenes wisdom shows that spiritual awakening is not about ego or spectacle, but about becoming a vessel through which divine love can touch the world. The revelations surrounding these spiritual centers opened a door to understanding human existence as far more than flesh and thought. It revealed us as conduits of a greater force. And for those willing to embrace the practices, the journey became one of transformation so profound that their lives seemed to radiate with new purpose. Write in the comments, "I awaken the light within," if this resonates with your path. Cayce never left his insights in the realm of vague mysticism. He provided concrete instructions, simple practices that anyone could apply, no matter their background or level of spiritual knowledge. His approach was practical, almost scientific, as though he were mapping out a hidden system that had always been part of human design. People who followed these steps didn't just feel subtle shifts. They documented profound changes that left lasting impact on their lives. Visions, healing experiences, and a steady flow of inspiration became real, not because of blind belief, but because they engaged in practices that opened their inner channels. This behind-the-scenes detail is crucial. It wasn't about superstition or blind faith, but about methods that consistently led to transformation when applied with sincerity. What struck many was how natural the process felt once these spiritual centers were awakened. Instead of struggling, pushing, or forcing a connection with God, they described it as effortless, like a river that had always been flowing but was now unobstructed. Imagine walking through life and feeling that divine current as constant as your own heartbeat, present in every decision, every challenge, every quiet moment. The shift was not into something extraordinary and unreachable, but into a state that felt like the most natural thing in the world, as if one had finally remembered what it means to be fully alive. The hidden truth here is that divine connection is not something to be achieved, but something to be uncovered, allowed to flow once the inner obstacles are removed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce was careful to remind people that this awakening was not without responsibility. The danger was never in the divine energy itself, but in how human beings chose to handle it. He warned that awakening spiritual gifts without grounding them in love and service could distort their purpose. Behind the stories of success and revelation were also cautionary tales. People who sought these abilities for ego, power, or control often found themselves in confusion or imbalance. Cayce explained that energy magnifies what is already within you. If your heart is rooted in compassion, the gifts will blossom in ways that bring healing and light. But if the motivation is pride or personal gain, the same awakening can become disruptive, leaving one lost in illusions. This warning is not meant to instill fear, but to reveal a deeper layer of responsibility. Spiritual power is like fire. It can warm and illuminate, or it can burn and destroy depending on how it is directed. That's why Cayce placed so much emphasis on service, humility, and aligning with a higher purpose. He wanted people to understand that these abilities were never meant to glorify the individual, but to make them vessels of something greater. The journey, then, is not just about awakening centers of power, but about cultivating the mindset and heart capable of carrying them. Imagine for a moment the impact of applying this wisdom in your own life. What would it mean to awaken the flow of divine energy and at the same time channel it into acts of kindness, into decisions rooted in integrity, into a life dedicated not only to personal transformation, but to uplifting others? The result is a balance that keeps the energy pure, ensuring that the light revealed within continues to shine outward without distortion. It is a reminder that true, spiritual growth is inseparable from compassion and service, that the journey is not only about what we receive, but about what we give back. This perspective changes the way we look at spiritual awakening. It is no longer about chasing extraordinary experiences, but about integrating them into the fabric of everyday life. It's about walking into a room and carrying peace with you, making choices that reflect divine guidance, and living in such a way that the presence of God is felt not only within but through you. And for those who embraced this balance, life became a living testimony of love in action. Write in the comments, "I choose love over ego," if this speaks to you. Cayce's fourth teaching moves into a dimension that touches the very core of human existence. He revealed that every soul carries within it a divine blueprint, an ideal that serves as both compass and foundation for our journey. This ideal isn't a vague aspiration or a passing desire. It is the deepest imprint of why we are here, the hidden truth of our existence written into the very fabric of our being. When people live connected to this inner ideal, life takes on a sense of meaning that feels undeniable. Decisions align with clarity, challenges are met with resilience, and even the smallest actions resonate with purpose. But when this blueprint is ignored or forgotten, the impact is unmistakable. A sense of emptiness creeps in, leaving people restless, unfocused, and searching for meaning in places where it cannot be found. Most of humanity, Cayce explained, drifts disconnected from this guiding principle. They chase borrowed ideals, expectations inherited from family, culture, or tradition that may sound noble but don't truly align with their soul's mission. Behind the scenes, this is why so many find themselves striving, achieving, and yet feeling hollow at the peak of their accomplishments. They may build successful careers, amass wealth, or gain recognition, but the quiet question lingers: why does it still feel incomplete? The reason is simple, yet profound. They are living by an external script rather than the internal blueprint their spirit came into this world to fulfill. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce emphasized that discovering your spiritual ideal is not about identifying a profession, a role, or even a passion in the conventional sense. It is about uncovering your soul's purpose in this moment of history. It might express itself through your career or through personal relationships, but the essence of it is much larger than any label. It is the guiding principle that shapes your mindset, influences your decisions, and infuses every part of your journey with authenticity. This is what makes the process so transformative. To discover your ideal requires peeling back layers of conditioning, letting go of the borrowed definitions of success, and listening instead for the quiet voice of your soul. Cayce often guided seekers into meditation, asking them to pose specific questions that cut through the noise. What am I here to contribute? What vibration do I want my life to radiate? What quality of spirit do I choose to embody? These questions don't point to job titles or social roles. They point to essence. One person's ideal might be to live as an expression of compassion, another's as a beacon of truth, another's as a vessel of healing. And when that essence is embraced, the outer path begins to unfold naturally, with opportunities, connections, and experiences aligning in ways that once felt out of reach. The impact of living disconnected from this truth is profound, but the transformation of reconnecting with it is even greater. People who aligned with their true ideals reported feeling as if a veil had been lifted from their lives. They spoke of renewed energy, clarity and direction, and a sense of meaning that no external achievement could match. This wasn't about escaping from life's difficulties, but about facing them with a new strength, anchored in something unshakable. It is the difference between wandering through fog and walking a path lit by inner fire. And there is something even more revealing about this teaching. Cayce insisted that our ideals are not static. They evolve as we grow. What serves as your guiding principle now may unfold into new dimensions as your awareness expands. This dynamic quality ensures that the journey never becomes stagnant, that there is always more depth to discover, more light to embody. It is a continual unfolding of purpose that keeps life vibrant and alive, reminding us that we are not fixed beings, but evolving expressions of the divine. The hidden truth of this teaching is that every soul carries within it not only the seed of purpose, but the capacity to bring it into the world. And in doing so, we don't just transform our personal lives, we become part of the larger story of humanity's evolution. Write in the comments, "I choose my true ideal," if this resonates with your path. So many people walk through life guided by ideals that aren't truly theirs. They adopt the expectations of family, the rules of culture, or the standards of religion, without ever questioning whether those borrowed ideals align with the quiet voice of their own soul. At first, this might even bring a sense of stability. After all, following a ready-made script spares us from confronting uncertainty. But beneath the surface, the soul knows when it is out of alignment. The restlessness grows, the sense of disconnection deepens, and eventually even the brightest achievements can feel strangely hollow. It is a hidden truth of human experience. No matter how polished the surface, when we live by someone else's ideal, growth is blocked, and the heart quietly hungers for something more. Cayce revealed that the only way to move beyond this illusion is to turn inward, stripping away the borrowed layers and asking the questions that pierce through. Conditioning. Deep meditation and honest inner reflection open the door to discovery. What am I here to embody? What vibration do I want my life to radiate? These are not easy questions, because they demand sincerity and the courage to face truths that may unsettle old beliefs. But within that silence, impressions begin to rise, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, pointing us back to the blueprint that has always been there, waiting. This is not about a sudden flash of destiny, but about reconnecting with the undercurrent that has quietly been guiding us all along. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce insisted that once the true ideal is uncovered, the journey doesn't end. It begins to evolve. Ideals are not static markers carved in stone. They shift, grow, and expand as our awareness deepens. At one stage, a person's ideal may center around cultivating compassion. Later, it may evolve into embodying truth or radiating peace in turbulent times. The transformation is continuous, reflecting the soul's unfolding journey rather than a single destination. This is why those who commit to their ideal often describe life as a living revelation. They feel renewed, never stagnant, because the guiding principle adapts as they do, pulling them further into the mystery of their purpose. Behind the scenes of Cayce's readings are countless stories of individuals who made this shift. Ministers who once preached inherited doctrines discovered a living connection with spirit when they stopped following borrowed ideals. Teachers found new depth in their work when they realized their purpose wasn't only to educate, but to awaken. Parents uncovered fresh energy when they saw their role as more than providing, but as embodying love. These were not minor adjustments. They were radical transformations that altered how they saw themselves and how the world responded to them. It shows us that when someone aligns with their evolving ideal, even the most ordinary roles take on extraordinary significance. This teaching also brings with it a subtle challenge: the willingness to release what no longer fits. Growth requires letting go of past versions of ourselves, even those that once brought comfort or security. The decision to follow a true ideal often means stepping into uncertainty, but it is precisely in that step that the soul expands. The hidden truth is that the ideal is not a burden placed upon us, but a light that invites us forward. It doesn't restrict, it liberates, guiding us through each phase of our journey with fresh clarity. And perhaps the most inspiring part is that as each individual reconnects with their authentic ideal, the collective fabric of humanity shifts as well. When more people live aligned with truth rather than borrowed scripts, society itself begins to evolve, reflecting greater integrity, compassion, and unity. Write in the comments, "I live my true ideal," if these words echo something in your heart. Cayce's fifth teaching reaches into a place that many resist confronting, because it forces us to face the weight of emotions we often bury. He revealed that unforgiveness is not simply a moral issue or a matter of kindness, it is a form of spiritual poison. When we hold on to resentment, bitterness, or guilt, whether toward others, ourselves, or even toward God, we clog the very channel through which divine energy longs to flow. It's like trying to breathe deeply with lungs full of smoke. The life force cannot move freely, and the soul begins to suffocate. What makes this hidden truth so powerful is the realization that many of us carry these blocks unconsciously. We may pray, meditate, or seek spiritual connection with all sincerity, yet feel no breakthrough, not realizing that unresolved anger or grief is quietly standing in the way. The stories that emerged from Cayce's readings bring this into sharp focus. He described countless cases where individuals who had prayed faithfully for years suddenly discovered that their stagnation was rooted in unforgiveness. It wasn't that God had been silent, but that their own inner toxicity had built a wall between them and divine presence. And the moment forgiveness was embraced, not just intellectually, but at the level of the soul, something shifted instantly. Connection became alive, prayers became vibrant, and divine communion was no longer abstract, but tangible, immediate, and overwhelming in its clarity. This transformation was not gradual. It was as if a door long locked had been opened at last. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce emphasized that forgiveness is far more complex than the simple act of letting go. It is a process of deep purification, requiring us to uncover hidden layers of anger we may not even realize exist. One of the most startling revelations from his readings was how often people carried resentment toward God without naming it. A parent grieving the loss of a child, a person struck by illness, or anyone who has endured hardship may continue practicing their faith outwardly while inwardly carrying a quiet accusation. Why did you let this happen? Why wasn't I protected? That hidden anger, often cloaked beneath devotion, corrodes the soul and blocks communion more effectively than any external obstacle. Behind the scenes of Cayce's work, he guided individuals into facing these buried emotions with honesty and humility. He taught that anger at God was not blasphemy but a form of spiritual pride, an attempt to hold the divine accountable to our limited understanding of love and justice. Releasing it meant surrendering to a larger truth, that divine wisdom often operates beyond the reach of human perception. When this surrender occurred, the results were extraordinary. People reported not only peace, but a sense of presence so profound that it reshaped their entire journey. Some even transformed their suffering into service, turning personal pain into compassion for others, creating a ripple effect of healing far beyond themselves. Forgiveness in this sense becomes more than a moral duty. It is the clearing of toxicity that allows divine energy to pour through us unhindered. It is an act of liberation, not only for the person we forgive but for ourselves, a release that reconnects us with the source of life itself. Cayce often reminded seekers that divine connection is not withheld by God, but blocked by the walls we build within. And forgiveness is the key that dissolves those walls, leaving us open, receptive, and renewed. The impact of this teaching is immense, because it shows that the path to spiritual transformation does not require extraordinary rituals or esoteric knowledge, but the courage to face our wounds and choose release. Imagine the difference in your own journey if the weight of resentment were lifted, if every hidden anger, even the quiet ones directed toward God, could be dissolved. The energy once trapped in bitterness would flow back into life, fueling creativity, compassion, and clarity. Write in the comments, "I choose forgiveness," if this resonates with you. When forgiveness is fully embraced, it doesn't just dissolve inner tension, it becomes a source of new power. Cayce described how the very wounds that once weighed someone down could be transformed into instruments of healing, not only for themselves but for others. Pain stops being a closed circle of suffering and becomes the seed of compassion, a living bridge between one person's journey and the struggles of those around them. This is one of the most profound hidden truths in his teachings, that forgiveness, when genuine, does not merely resolve the past, it reshapes the future. It creates a mindset where what once was heavy becomes a force of light, rippling outward in ways impossible to measure. Many of the people who came to Cayce burdened by loss or bitterness later found themselves guiding others through similar trials, proof that transformation through forgiveness is not just internal, but also communal. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the sixth teaching reveals a paradox at the heart of the spiritual journey. Most of us have been taught that effort, discipline, and determination are the keys to success in life. And while that mindset may work in school, in work, or in building external achievements, it does not open the door to divine communion. Cayce saw over and over that those who tried to force spiritual connection through sheer willpower ended up frustrated and exhausted. They pushed harder, prayed louder, meditated longer, but the harder they tried, the further away God seemed to be. The hidden truth, Cayce explained, is that spiritual growth is not about striving, it is about surrender. This surrender, however, is not passive. It is not giving up, but rather stepping into a deeper kind of participation. Cayce called it creative surrender because it requires an active choice to let go of control while trusting that divine intelligence is already moving within and around us. It is a decision to create space for the unknown, to stop forcing outcomes, and instead to collaborate with the flow of life. Behind the scenes of his readings, Cayce described it as the difference between trying to climb up to heaven and realizing you can simply fall into God's arms. It is a change of posture, a shift from resistance to openness, and its impact is immediate. Think of it like preparing a garden. You do not force the seed to grow by pulling on it or demanding results. You prepare the soil, you water, you create the right conditions, and then you allow nature to do the rest. Creative surrender works in the same way. Our role is to prepare the inner soil, to clear the static, align with our true ideal, and forgive where necessary. Once those conditions are met, divine connection happens naturally, like a seed sprouting when it is ready. For those who experienced this, the shift was so dramatic that they described it as if a weight had fallen off. Instead of endless effort, there was ease. Instead of searching, there was finding. This surrender also reframes how we see partnership with God. Instead of imagining ourselves as beggars pleading for divine attention, we begin to recognize ourselves as co-creators, participants in an unfolding work of love. Cayce taught that when we align our will with divine will, we don't lose our individuality, we expand it. Our creativity, intuition, and purpose are magnified, not diminished. Spiritual growth becomes less about achieving a checklist of mystical experiences and more about living in a flow where inspiration and guidance emerge at the right time. The hidden truth here is that surrender does not diminish us, it makes us more. The journey of creative surrender is a challenge to the ego, because the ego craves control. It wants guarantees, results, and recognition. Letting go feels like risk, but it is in that very risk that transformation begins. When we surrender, we allow divine wisdom to shape our path in ways our limited perspective could never design. And in that collaboration, life begins to reveal patterns of synchronicity, guidance, and clarity that feel nothing short of miraculous. Write in the comments, "I choose surrender," if this resonates with your heart. When people shifted from effort to ease, something remarkable happened. The strain of trying to make a spiritual experience gave way to a state of receptivity where breakthroughs arrived effortlessly. It was as if the door they had been pushing against for years finally swung open the moment they stopped forcing it. This transition revealed a hidden truth about the spiritual journey. What we chase with tension often eludes us, but what we open to with trust begins to flow naturally. Those who embraced this shift spoke of sudden clarity, moments of inspiration that seemed to arrive out of nowhere, and a sense of communion that felt more real than anything they had ever tried to engineer through willpower. It was proof that surrender is not weakness, but alignment with a greater strength. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because creative surrender is often misunderstood. Many assume that surrender means passivity, a retreat into inaction or resignation. But Cayce emphasized the exact opposite. True surrender requires active participation. It is choosing to align with the divine current, consciously becoming a co-creator with God, rather than a passive bystander. This mindset transforms everything, because suddenly life is no longer about imposing control, but about collaborating with the unfolding wisdom that guides each moment. Behind the scenes, this means listening for impressions, noticing synchronicities, and acting with intention when opportunities arise. It is a dance between the human will and divine intelligence, a partnership that amplifies creativity, courage, and compassion. Imagine the impact of living in such a state. Decisions no longer carry the same anxiety because they are infused with a sense of guidance. Challenges, while still real, no longer feel like barriers but invitations to grow. Even setbacks are reframed as part of a larger tapestry, a journey where nothing is wasted and every thread contributes to the whole. This co-creative stance transforms mindset at its core. Instead of asking, "How can I make this happen?" the question becomes, "How can I align with what wants to unfold through me?" The shift may seem subtle, but the revelations it brings can alter the entire course of a life. From this foundation, Cayce introduced one of his most extraordinary teachings, the idea that every person has the ability to access the Akashic records. He described these records as a vast, cosmic library, containing the story of every soul, every choice, every lesson, and every potential that exists. For centuries, mystics and seers had spoken of hidden realms of knowledge, but Cayce demystified it by explaining that this reservoir of wisdom is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to all who learn to attune themselves. This was a revelation that shifted the boundaries of what people thought possible. Behind the scenes of his readings, Cayce routinely drew upon this source, offering information about past lives, future possibilities, and spiritual lessons that astonished those who sought his help. But the hidden truth, he revealed, is that these insights were not unique to him. They were the natural result of learning how to quiet the mind, align with divine vibration, and enter a state of unity with higher consciousness. Ordinary people could access the same guidance, not to satisfy curiosity, but to make decisions, to heal, and to align their journey with deeper purpose. Teachers discovered new ways to reach their students. Farmers received impressions that helped them nurture their crops, and parents found insights into the hidden needs of their children. The Akashic records became not an abstract idea, but a practical source of wisdom for everyday life. This teaching carries an almost breathtaking implication, that wisdom is not scarce, not hidden away in inaccessible realms, but present and available to anyone willing to enter that state of unity. It suggests that the boundaries of human potential are far wider than we imagine, and that divine knowledge is not locked behind walls, but waiting for us to remember how to listen. Write in the comments, "I open myself to higher wisdom," if this resonates with your journey. Cayce made it clear that accessing higher wisdom was not a gift reserved for a chosen few or for those labeled as psychics. He explained that ordinary people, those with no mystical training, no background in esoteric studies, could learn to attune their consciousness in a way that allowed them to receive guidance directly. This teaching broke down centuries of belief that divine insight was the privilege of prophets, saints, or visionaries. The hidden truth is that the door has always been open, waiting for anyone willing to quiet their mind, align with higher vibration, and enter a state of deeper receptivity. The transformation comes not from rare talent but from a willingness to prepare, to listen, and to trust the impressions that surface when the noise of the ego fades. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because when people began to apply Cayce's methods, the impact on daily life was astonishing. It wasn't about escaping into lofty spiritual experiences disconnected from reality. It was about grounding divine wisdom into ordinary decisions. Teachers suddenly found new ways to connect with students, intuitively understanding their struggles and strengths in ways that no textbook could reveal. Farmers reported impressions about soil, weather, and planting cycles that improved their harvests, aligning their work with rhythms that seemed almost guided by nature itself. Parents discovered insights into their children's hidden gifts, learning how to nurture talents and provide guidance uniquely suited to each child's spirit. These weren't abstract stories of enlightenment. They were real, practical revelations that changed the way people lived, worked, and loved. Behind the scenes, Cayce often described this as living with an inner compass that never failed. Instead of stumbling through uncertainty, people began to feel a quiet assurance guiding their steps. They still faced challenges, of course, but those challenges no longer carried the same weight of confusion. Choices became clearer, timing felt more precise, and even setbacks revealed themselves as part of a larger pattern of growth. The mindset shift was profound. Life stopped feeling random and began to feel guided, as if each person were part of a tapestry being woven with intention. And from this individual awakening, Cayce foresaw something even greater, the rise of what he called group consciousness. As more people tapped into divine wisdom, a collective field of awareness began to emerge. It was no longer just about isolated seekers finding personal clarity, but about entire communities experiencing transformation together. The hidden truth here is that consciousness is not separate, it is interconnected. When one person awakens, the ripple extends outward, making it easier for others to awaken as well. The more individuals align with divine guidance, the more humanity itself begins to shift. Imagine the impact of this on a global scale. Decisions made by leaders guided not by ego, but by higher wisdom. Communities shaped by compassion rather than fear. Families rooted in understanding rather than conflict. Cayce envisioned a time when enough people aligning with this wisdom would create a tipping point, a collective awakening that would elevate humanity as a whole. This wasn't a vague hope, it was a revelation that as individual minds align with truth, the group mind transforms, accelerating the journey for everyone. It reframes the idea of spirituality as something deeply personal, yet profoundly collective. Each person who chooses alignment contributes not only to their own growth but to the evolution of human consciousness itself. It is a journey that begins within but extends outward, connecting us all in ways we may not fully grasp but can undeniably feel. Write in the comments, "I am part of the awakening," if this resonates with your spirit. When we look at the 7 teachings together, the brilliance lies not in each principle standing alone, but in how they interlace, creating a complete system. Prayer becomes the opening chord, not a desperate request but an alignment with divine current. Purification clears the interference so that energy can flow without distortion. The awakening of spiritual centers amplifies that flow, making connection not just possible, but natural. The discovery of one's true ideal directs the current, giving it shape and meaning so it doesn't disperse aimlessly. Forgiveness dissolves the blockages that would otherwise poison the stream, while surrender ensures that it doesn't become twisted by ego. Finally, access to higher wisdom anchors it all, offering guidance that transcends the limits of human reason. Each element builds on the others, forming a structure where transformation becomes not a miracle of chance, but the natural result of alignment. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because what Cayce foresaw wasn't just a system for individuals in his time, it was a blueprint for humanity's future. He spoke of an era when the hunger for authentic connection with the divine would rise to the surface, when old systems of belief would no longer satisfy the human spirit. That moment, he suggested, would be marked by an almost global restlessness, a longing that would drive people away from rigid traditions and toward direct experience. Looking at the world today, it is hard not to see the accuracy of that vision. Across cultures and generations, people are searching for meaning beyond material success, searching for truth behind the structures that once promised certainty, but now feel empty. Behind the scenes of this awakening, we see its signs everywhere. Spiritual content floods every platform, from books to podcasts to conversations that would have been unthinkable in public spaces a generation ago. Mental health crises expose the consequences of living disconnected from purpose. Families, workplaces, even entire communities feel the strain of trying to function without a deeper sense of meaning. And yet, within that crisis lies the opening Cayce predicted. The hidden truth is that collapse and hunger are not only symptoms of decline, but invitations to transformation. The void people feel is not the absence of God. It is the absence of alignment with the principles that allow divine connection to flow. Cayce believed that during this time, spiritual leadership would no longer come from traditional authorities, but from ordinary individuals awakening to their own ideals and sharing the light that emerges. This is not leadership by title but by presence, the kind of influence that comes when someone embodies truth so fully that it radiates outward. It means the awakening is not limited to a few chosen figures. It belongs to anyone willing to step into alignment. Imagine the impact if thousands, even millions, began to live with this awareness, each person acting as a node of divine energy in their families, communities, and workplaces. The collective effect would be immense, a transformation of consciousness rippling across humanity. And this brings us back to the urgency of Cayce's message. He described windows of time when the veil between the physical and spiritual becomes thinner, when connection becomes easier, almost natural. We are living in such a window now. That is why so many people are experiencing synchronicities, sudden awakenings, and a sense that unseen forces are nudging them toward a higher path. It is not coincidence. It is the unfolding of the moment Cayce foresaw. The decisions we make now, whether to resist or to open, to cling to the old or to embrace the new, carry an impact far beyond personal transformation. They shape the collective journey of humanity at a pivotal point in history. The awakening is not something distant or abstract. It is happening in the conversations we have, the choices we make, the way we treat one another in the midst of uncertainty. Each act of alignment contributes to the group consciousness that Cayce described, accelerating the pace of transformation for all. And so the question becomes less about whether this awakening will happen, and more about how we will participate in it, how we will embody the wisdom that has been left as a guide for this exact moment. Write in the comments, "The awakening is now," if you feel this truth stirring within you. If you've journeyed with me all the way to this point, it tells me something. You're someone who values depth, truth, and the kind of wisdom that can really shape a life. That's exactly what we explore here. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next step on this path. And since you made it all the way to the end, let me know in the comments by writing, "I'm with you until the end." I'd love to see who's truly walking in this journey alongside me. If this message resonated with you, give the video a like. It helps keep this space alive and connected. And before you go, there's a video right here that complements everything we've just explored. Click and continue with me over there.